Welcome, everybody. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the study of experimental learning and pathways to employment for Canadian youth is getting underway. This is very exciting. We are televised today, just so everybody knows to keep their ties straight. We are very pleased to welcome Honourable Patty Hajdu, Member of Parliament and Minister of Employment for Workforce Development and Labour. Patty, we're just going to get right into it and give you the floor to speak, and then, of course, we'll have, I'm sure, a number of questions for you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for the invitation to appear before the committee, the Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills and Social Development and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Heureuse que le comité ait choisi d'étudier de l'apprentissage.
Today we're going to be discussing experiential learning for Canadian youth. Investing in experiential learning is extremely lucrative for young people who are entering the workforce. It gives them the chance to learn more about their profession, and is particularly important for vulnerable youth who perhaps would not have the opportunity otherwise. So thank you for studying this important topic.
Multiple measures that our government is putting into place to address the situation and the results that we've achieved to date on this issue. And I'm also going to give you a broad overview of the kinds of enduring challenges that our country will be facing in the coming years and how we intend to respond as we move forward. First of all, investing in work-integrated learning pays off huge dividends in the success of young people in the labour market. Getting a foot in the door or a chance to learn about the profession is particularly critical for vulnerable youth as well, who may not have the opportunity to get that chance otherwise. We need to provide youth with the tools and the education, the training, and the opportunities that they need to fully succeed in their chosen careers. Around the world, the labour market is evolving, and we need to keep pace. Job requirements continue to change, and workers' credentials are not necessarily matching the skills that employers are seeking. And so we need to put a greater emphasis on essential skills, and something that employers tell me all the time, soft skills, things like how to manage a difficult employee and how to answer a phone and provide good customer service no matter what occupation you're in, things like digital skills. We need to make sure that all young Canadians have a fair chance to succeed. And providing opportunities for workplace experience is an important part of our effort to do just that, as work experience is critical to a successful transition for youth from school to work. These opportunities benefit young people. Of course, employers often offer higher starting salaries to graduates who have work placement experience. But apprenticeship is also a proven model for transitioning into well-paying jobs, into the skilled trades, which are in such great demand. In fact, more than 80% of apprentices were successful in securing employment in 2015. So I'm going to give you some examples of what we've put into place to support Canada's young people to help them transition to the workplace. Le fait démontre que l'expérience.
The facts show that work experience is the key to a successful transition for these youth. Employers generally offer higher starting salaries to graduates who have practical experience. The labor market is constantly changing, and our help to facilitate the transition from school to the workplace must keep up with this change.
Career-focused stream of the Youth Employment Strategy, which supported over 6,500 youth in finding work placements in 2016-17. We've also nearly doubled Canada's summer jobs compared to the previous government. We recently launched a new partnership with industry and post-secondary education institutes to offer 10,000 new work-integrated learning placements for students in the STEM fields and business, with an investment of $73 million over 4 years. And in addition to our investments in student placements through MyTax, we'll help create up to 60,000 paid work placements over the next 5 years. We've also put into place measures to ensure young Canadians are always appropriately compensated for their work placements and internships. Bill C-63 includes amendments to the Canada Labour Code that would prohibit unpaid internships within federally regulated private sectors, unless they're part of the requirements for an educational program, and to ensure that interns who are unpaid are covered by labour standards protections such as maximum hours of work, weekly days of rest, and general holidays. We know that young people make better decisions about their education and career path when they have good data and information that helps them make those decisions. And the OECD and other research confirms that good quality and timely information and advice play an important role in informing young people's aspirations. And for this reason, we've enhanced Canada Job Bank, and we're going to continue to modernize it with current technology platforms so that it will be youth-centered and user-friendly, something that all of the young people in my life are quite excited about. On another note, I cannot stress enough how much financial assistance is essential to removing barriers to post-secondary education. We've made very important enhancements in this area. For example, we increased non-repayable Canada student grants by 50% and made them available to more students from low and middle income families. And this means that starting in 2017-2018 school year, over 400,000 students from low and middle income families have been receiving up to $3,000 in non-repayable financial aid each and every year. And approximately 46,000 of those students will be eligible for the first time for the Canada Student Grant for full-time students. We've also introduced the fixed student contribution, allowing students who work to continue to do so without having to worry about a reduction in the amount of financial assistance they will receive. And now no student has to repay a Canada student loan until they're earning at least $25,000 a year. We've also renewed our investment in Pathways to Education Canada for an additional 4 years, starting at 2018-19. If you haven't found out about this program yet, I highly encourage you to take a look. This program works to make sure that at-risk youth are able to complete high school and transition to post-secondary studies. And we continue to make significant efforts to increase take-up of the Canada Learning Bond. In May of 2017, an important milestone was reached, and 1 million Canadian children are now enrolled and have more affordable post-secondary education in their futures. And last week, we launched a call for concepts, and that's really our way to look for new and innovative ways that will increase awareness and uptake of the Canada Learning Bond. And we encourage organizations with ideas to submit their concepts by January 16, 2018. Now, the renewal of the Youth Employment Strategy gives us a really good opportunity to work with all our partners to ensure that young Canadians have all the necessary supports they need to succeed. And the Youth Employment Strategy has already produced results for young people, real results across the country over the last 20 years. But we have to acknowledge that a lot has happened in the last 20 years, and times have changed. De plus, nous commençons tout.
Moreover, we have just started exploring the renewed program for youth jobs
And the new needs of young people across this country. It'll also help us to understand the measures that are working well and that need to stay the same, and what kinds of things need to change to make sure that we're reaching our target goal, which is that every young person across this country has the supports that they need to access post-secondary education, to access that kinds of experiences that will help them move forward in meaningful work, good middle-class jobs across this country. The current study of the committee will undoubtedly greatly inform our work. And through this renewal, we're exploring 4 key areas for action. 1, supporting smoother transitions from school to work, helping young people develop skills to keep pace with the changing nature of work. Thirdly, helping vulnerable youth to meet their potential. And finally, exploring how employers could play a greater leadership role in youth employment. Provincial, territorial, and municipal governments, along with numerous stakeholders, also play a critical role as they provide a range of supports for youth, and we'll be looking at how we can increase and amplify our partnerships with all of our stakeholders. I'm very interested in learning more about how others in Canada are supporting youth transitions into the labour market, and I'm also interested in lessons from other countries. We can all benefit from sharing best practices from the experiences of others both in Canada and internationally. Youth need opportunities to be active citizens and community leaders, and so service and volunteering experiences is another way that young people can build skills and personal growth while giving back to their community. So we'll soon be launching the design phase of a new youth service initiative, during which youth will be directly engaged to build a program that responds to their interests to serve their community, and this means that we'll be building a program that has been designed by youth for youth. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, we know that Canada's future prosperity depends on young Canadians getting the skills and the experience that they need to succeed and that employers are looking for. And this is an essential way that we can continue to ensure a growing economy in a way that works for everyone. Successful transitions from school to work represent a socioeconomic win-win for us. Students get that hands-on experience that they need to succeed, and employers find that talent that they're desperately seeking. Active, healthy citizens who are pursuing their aspirations and driving economic growth are critical for us to change and adapt to this economy, which brings new challenges, but I believe great opportunity for Canada. And I have every confidence that Canadian young people will seize those opportunities if we help pave the way. We just can't afford to leave so much talent behind. We can't afford to see young Canadians either not pursuing their education or not getting jobs aligned with their skills and training. So the study that this committee is undertaking right now is extremely timely and will greatly inform our work, and I'm very glad that you've chosen it. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Minister. And in my haste to get things moving today, I failed to recognize a few people. I'd like to recognize that from the Department of Employment and Social Development, we're joined here today by Louise Livonian, Deputy Minister. Welcome back to this committee. Also want to extend a welcome back to MP Brigitte Sanssouci. We've missed you. And also a thank you for helping us out today for MP Picard for being here. We're going to get started with questions. I understand the Minister is able to extend her stay for an additional 15 minutes, so we will have the Minister until 5:15. That gives us about 15 minutes to deal with some committee business. And starting us off, we have MP Wong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to the committee, Minister. I'm really disappointed at the fact that the youth unemployment rate is now at 13%, which is very, very high. And then the fact that the number of summer jobs for youth seem to have increased, which probably has not really been the truth. The truth is that the number of weeks which the young person can work has been greatly reduced. And for the short end, there's no way these students can find another job. So that is the problem with this summer job strategy. So these are my statements, and I'm really disappointed in what's happening right now. I'll share my time with my colleague.
Okay. Welcome, Madame Minister, and we sure are welcoming this study. Je vais m'exprimer en français.
I will be speaking in French. We recently saw the government and the opposition parties, as well as PM Trudeau, make an important apology. But what concerns me is that the Prime Minister made promises regarding regional workers, specifically seasonal workers, such as workers from New Brunswick, from regions of Quebec like Charlevoix, the Côte-Nord, the Bas-de-Fleuve region, and Gaspésie. We want our youth to work, we want there to be jobs, and we want to ensure that seasonal workers who are going through the black hole period, that's the period where they've come to the end of their EI benefits before the seasonal work begins again. So my question is about how the government is breaking its promise to help seasonal workers get through that black hole time.
Mr. Blaney, thank you for the question, and we understand that there is a challenge, and my department is looking at that very closely, and Minister Duclos will be happy to answer questions at a later date, but certainly the Deputy is aware of the issue and is working on it right now with the department, and we'll have more to say at a later date. In terms of youth unemployment, I mean, the youth unemployment rate has remained somewhat stagnant. In 2015, it was actually 10%, which is lower than its historical average of 12.1% since 1976. And so, although that's quite high, and I would agree with the member that we want to see that rate lowered, certainly internationally, we're doing all right compared to some of our international partners. For example, the long-term unemployment rate, for example, we have is 5.1% versus 21.8% in terms of the OECD average. And so, not to diminish our concern, which is why we're here and why we're looking at rejuvenating the youth employment strategy, I would say that we're definitely tracking in the right direction, and I think there's more to do. In terms of Canada Summer Jobs, it's an incredible program. It provides young people all across Canada an opportunity to get work experience, in some cases for the very first time in their lives. That's a paid work experience opportunity, and employers as well, oftentimes would not have an opportunity to hire a young person if it was not for the Canada Summer Jobs. We're very proud of that.
Madame la ministre, justement, vous parlez du programme d'emploi.
Minister, specifically, you discussed the summer jobs program, and once again, there's a black hole. It's true that there are more resources for the program now, but there are more youth participating in it, rather. Oh, but you've reduced the length of this program, and now youth are working for part of the summer, and then they're in another black hole because they don't have time to find another job, and the length of the experience doesn't allow them to get all the knowledge they need. So with seasonal workers, you're telling us that there is a solution, but these workers are waiting. Same thing for the summer jobs program. How is it that you have reduced the length, the duration of this program? Our youth is being penalized here because at the end of the period, after this apprenticeship period, they are finding themselves without any employment.
Employers and young people across Canada has been phenomenal, and in fact, many communities and MPs, in fact, have come up to me and talked to me about the success of the Canada Summer Job in their riding. Young people are grateful for that experience. To get paid work experience is no small feat in this country, especially in the summer when you have a volume of young people out there looking for well-paying, decent jobs, and so the competition is intense. And so for young people that are able to score one of these Canada Summer Jobs, and I met hundreds and hundreds of them across the country, I heard nothing but praise for the program and the fact that they had an opportunity to work oftentimes in a sector very aligned with their studies. And so, whether I was visiting on the West Coast or in the East Coast or up north in my own riding, I met students that were taking part in the tourism industry and in the business sector. Even small businesses now able to access Canada Summer Jobs, which allowed young people who have perhaps an interest in entrepreneurship to get that good paying summer job that would help them offset the cost of studies, but also give them that sector experience that so many times they're looking for. As a matter of fact, in one community, I met a young person working in a home for people with disabilities, a recreational facility, and the executive director told me that she had started with that position, with that company as a Canada Summer Jobs, and 10, 15 years later, she was running the joint. And so it was really affirming to see that not only did it work for short-term employment, but it also worked for determining a career path.
Thank you. Sorry, that's your time. Now over to MP Fortier, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank you, Minister Hajdu, for being here today. I think we need to recognize that this study is going to allow us to examine where we can find improvements, and even, if I've understood correctly, what other opportunities we may be able to find to improve the youth employment strategy. A short anecdote: I was chair of the Francophone Canadian Youth Organization 20 years ago when the government announced the youth employment strategy. The Liberal government that has been in place for 2 years has continued to invest in the strategy, and that's something that's very important to recognize. But we do know that over the last 20 years, the program has changed. Technology has greatly affected the labor market. So my question is the following. Why is it that youth today need new skills and more experience with changing technologies? And what are you doing to keep up with this rapidly changing labor environment?
It's great that you've come full circle from chairing a committee and now being able to participate in the rejuvenation of the youth employment strategy. And you're absolutely right. Changing technology is one of the critical components of looking at a renewed youth employment strategy. interestingly enough, it's often youth leading the way in terms of being able to adapt to technology very rapidly. And I think so we have a couple of problems on our hands. One is that are the academic institutions, the polytechnics, the colleges and so forth, training for the right sets of skills that employers are looking for? And the second problem is, are employers considering new graduates as the resource that they really are? And so when I was announcing the Work Integrated Learning Program, the Student Work Placement Program recently, I had an opportunity to meet some of the companies that will be utilizing the student work placements. And many of them talked about how great it was to see young people coming right out of school into their workplace. And they talked about the benefit to their corporation. They talked about how this new way of thinking, that often young people came with a different perspective, new solutions to old problems, and by the way, were very adept at using technology and could quickly learn new systems and new ways of doing things because, first of all, they were studying them, but also because they had that lens that many times older workers struggle with. And so it was a real opportunity to hear not just how this will be beneficial for young people, but also how employers are saying we need students with that ability to be flexible, that ability to rapidly acquire the knowledge in new ways. And so when we provide that matchmaking program through something like, say, the Student Work Placement Program, it really does bring together young people who are desperately seeking that first paid experience, employers who are looking for talent, skill, but also that adaptability that helps their corporations grow. And I saw many examples of this. And, you know, some of the spaces that I was visiting and some of the high-tech firms that are doing things that I can't even describe in words because I'm an old person now, you know, their workforce is very young. I mean, it was astounding to me when I would walk onto the floor that oftentimes it would be, you know, people under 30, and what the employers told us is they see youth as an asset. So we need to sort of spread that idea throughout the employer community.
Une autre question que je voulais vous poser cet après-midi.
Another question I had for you today. I've had the privilege of doing a lot of canvassing over the past year, and women are telling me that it's still hard, young women are saying that it's still hard to find jobs in engineering, math, science, those kinds of fields. So I wonder if there are any programs or measures that will enable us to encourage or support women who wish to enter the STEM fields.
Question, and as you know, MP Fortier, my first role was Minister of Status of Women, and so I spent a lot of time talking about the barriers that women face, and especially some of the what we call non-traditional sectors, or where they're dramatically underrepresented. And you're absolutely right, STEM is one of those areas. And though we see women choosing those courses of study more and more and more, we're not seeing the corresponding numbers of women in those fields. And so we know that it's more than just women choosing to study in STEM, that it's actually other barriers that women are facing. And so we are trying to work with employers to provide additional incentives for employers to be thoughtful about how they recruit women and retain women into their sectors that traditionally have been male-dominated. And so, for example, the Union Training and Innovation Program, which is a program we announced last summer, which is seeking unions to come forward and thoughtfully tell us what kinds of things they can do to recruit people that are underrepresented, including women. So women, Indigenous people, people with disabilities, newcomers to Canada. And this is a real win-win because also, as you may know, we have about 110,000 unfilled skilled trade positions in this country. So we really are missing an opportunity when we're even unintentionally biased in the way that we create space for women in some of these non-traditional sectors. We also, through the Student Work Placement Program, are providing additional incentives to employers who are thoughtfully thinking about how they recruit, and when they actually hire a woman, a person who's Indigenous, person with disability, or a newcomer, they will receive an additional incentive in terms of compensation to help support that hire.
Thank you very much. Yeah, sorry, you're done. And now over to Madame Sanssouci, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci, Madame la Ministre.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the Minister for her presentation. As we start this study, I think it's important to understand the role of the federal government. We know it has the constitutional power, that provincial governments and territorial governments have the power to make legislation on education generally, the federal powers apply only to Indigenous people, to correctional establishments, to the military. And ultimately, it is the social services transfer that allows the federal government to influence this. And it's interesting to see that the third recommendation of the expert working group on youth employment stated that when reworking these youth employment programs, the government of Canada needs to consider the possibility of transferring youth employment strategies to provincial and territorial governments. It even asked the government to account for this in the 12 months following the report. Education training is regulated by the provinces and territories, which leads to my question. As the federal government's role in this matter needs to be carried out in partnership with the provinces and territories, and given that in your mandate letter, the Prime Minister asked you to collaborate with these governments, as well as post-secondary teachers groups or institutions rather, I would like to ask you what type of cooperation you have struck up with the provincial and territorial governments, and what is the federal government's role in this cooperation?
We play a critical role in the form of LMDAs and LMTAs, the transfer agreements that we have with provinces and territories, where we transfer sums of money to the provinces and territories. And we've actually committed an additional $1.8 billion over 6 years in those provincial and territorial transfers to ensure that provinces have the support that they need to pursue skills training in a way that's relevant to their province. And in those negotiations, we've agreed to a shared set of outcomes where we'll be able to actually measure outcomes together and benchmark those outcomes so that we can understand the results of those transfers. Now, in terms of the recommendation of the expert panel on youth employment, we still think there is a space for federal government to show leadership. We have, of course, the Canada Labour Code, and we have many employers that are federally regulated. We also are very concerned about young people that fall through the cracks of provincial programs and that maybe aren't getting those services in a way that makes sense to them. And we think we can be a partner and augment what provinces are doing. We know that we have provincial jurisdiction to respect, and we, of course, do that. But we have an opportunity to work with our provincial and territorial partners to make sure that we leverage what they're doing and that we ensure that people that, for one reason or another, that may not be able to access services through their province or territory services have another place to go, and that would be their country.
Merci. Bon, on vient de le dire, là, votre lettre de...
Thank you. Now, as just mentioned, your mandate letter and budget 2017 both mention the recommendations of the expert group, and I would like to come back to 3 of those recommendations. Firstly, updating labor standards in Canada. In recommendation 8, they recommended that the Canada Labour Code be amended to recognize the new forms of work that now exist. You've already started by eliminating unpaid internships. There is also recommendation 9, which is to broaden eligibility to EI because youth are particularly affected by these eligibility criteria. So to ensure that these criteria are the same throughout Canada, and that's something that all organizations that work with unemployed individuals have made. And finally, returning to study for these young people after they leave a job in order to go back to work, they shouldn't be penalized, is the point that was made. And the third recommendation was to get better data. It's always important, is to have the right statistics. So my question is, what is the government's response to these recommendations that were made last June?
As you know, under my role as the federal labor minister, I am looking at the Canada labor standards, and we're doing that work right now in consultation with partners and stakeholders, with unions and with employers, and we are holding consultations to make sure that we understand the new landscape. You know, as you know, it's work that continues, and there are pieces that we can take action on right now, but comprehensively, we want to make sure that we work in that tripartite relationship and respect employers and labor movement, to know that when we put forward those proposals, that they'll be well received and that we'll have the right answers. In terms of young people and their eligibility to EI and returning to study, I mean, one of the things that we have committed to is making it easier for older people to study, and that would include older young people, I suppose, that have been in school and have have gone into the labor market and then have not pursued their education and then have to leave the labor market or try to increase or enhance their skills. And we've talked about that. And so we've put in some flexibilities around older workers. Those would include younger, older workers. And it's something that I personally feel very passionate about, as many of you may have heard. I mean, I didn't graduate with my degree till I was 28, and it was very challenging. I was a full-time employee with young children and a single mother. And so I'm well aware of the challenges that older people face, older, younger people face, that have, for one reason or another, not completed their course of study or have a desire to go back and upgrade their skills. And we think it's worthwhile to invest in those individuals, because we know that every opportunity that they get to enhance their skills and improve their skills means that there's a better job waiting out there for them, and that every opportunity for skill development results in higher earning potentials and an opportunity for them to increase their earning potential, which ultimately has intergenerational impact.
Thank you. Thank you. And now over to MP Rumi, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Minister, for being here today. I am a huge fan of the Canada Summer Jobs. The first year that we did it, it's always been closed to business, small business in my riding, and I changed that. And we went out, I actually followed 90% of every student that was hired. I went to their organizations, I watched what they did, I watched how they connected it to their organizations, and in the second year, we actually put we went out and we called up 500 businesses, and we pushed, and we ended up getting about $100,000 more in funding. So I've seen a tremendous rise in that. In fact, my understanding is that we've doubled the amount of Canada Summer Jobs in this country from what it was previous. And I've seen the results of that. It's a fantastic program that, if served well, can actually give students practice in what they're learning in school. So my question to you, I'll be sharing my time with MP Morrissey, but my question to you is, as I said, many people in my riding have gained valuable experience thanks to the youth employment strategy. You mentioned that you were revitalizing the program. Can you explain a little bit more in detail?
Well, the revitalization is of the youth employment strategy as a whole. And, certainly, as you mentioned, the commitment to double the Canada Summer Jobs is something that we continue to work on, and we're very close to doubling. And as you mentioned, there were some challenges in the first year around just employers knowing that it was available. And so I want to thank all the MPs that went out and made sure that their employers in their ridings knew about Canada Summer Jobs and applied. And so we'll continue that work to make sure that employers know about the program, that they can apply for the program, and that all of the students, possible, have an opportunity to access the program. The work that we're doing right now on the youth employment strategy includes Canada Summer Jobs, and of course we are open to looking at Canada Summer Jobs and how we can make the program better, because better is always possible. But we're also looking at other aspects of the Canada Summer Jobs, youth employment strategy, which would include things like helping people after they're finished their education get that first job in their particular career. Student work integrated and learning is one example. This is part of the study that you're doing, and it really is a key component of the study that you're doing in terms of experiential learning. And we're very curious to see if we can, increase our efforts in that space. But it will also be about how we ensure vulnerable youth get that shot at success. And when I meet some of the Skills Links participants across the country, many of you have Skills Links programs in your riding. These are the young kids that are 16 to 24 that are not in school and that are not employed and that are often struggling with profound challenges in their life, whether it's homelessness or substance use or poor literacy skills or just a total lack of self-confidence. And so we can't leave those kids behind either, because in fact, if we do that, A, we're losing out on an opportunity to have all that talent contribute to the growth of our country, but B, the longer people stay unemployed, the more entrenched that becomes, the harder it becomes for them to get a job, and at the end of the day, that is a cost rather than an opportunity for prosperity.
Thank you. And you speak of a skills linked training program. Again, another program that's in my riding that every single intake that comes in, I spend 2 hours with the entire group, because they need to know that their government is there for them and that they have the ability to move forward. A fantastic program. I'm going to pass it off to MP Morrissey.
Thank you, Chair. First, I want to correct a couple of comments. The youth unemployment rate is the lowest it's been in 15 years. Part of that was due to one of the moves our government made, Minister, that you were part of, that we removed the very punitive new entrant requirement, which disproportionately impacted young people in the country on accessing a DEI program. In fact, it was the former government that cut $20 million from the youth employment strategy. Minister, my question is focusing on your comment that you made, because it's an area that I focus on as an MP, and your statement, we must ensure all young Canadians have a chance to succeed, and we cannot afford to leave these youth behind. This is the category 17 to 29, which you have a specific program for, that captures disadvantaged youth and reorient them into the workplace. These are people that you referred to in your opening comments. Could you speak to this issue and the ongoing need to put more and more dollars into this stream of your funding programs? I believe it's one of your 4 key pillar areas. There are programs such as Pathway to Success, excellent program that you have, Minister.
So yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, the problem with austerity budgeting and balanced budgeting is that cuts have to happen. And so the youth employment strategy budget was cut by $20 million under your colleague Pierre, or under some of my colleagues, Pierre Poilievre. And 65,000 fewer youth were assisted by youth employment strategies during their tenure. So that's a significant drop. And so I'm glad that you raised that point, because I think it's important that we understand that when we invest in Canadians, we get the best out of Canadians, and we get the best out of our economy. You know, the Prime Minister is famous for saying confident countries invest in themselves, and that's exactly what the youth employment strategy should be doing. It should be investing in the promise of Canadians, investing in the promise of our country. So let me just tell you about Pathways. I just want to get to Pathways because you're very right. Pathways is an incredible program, and we do support Pathways, even though one would say that it's really not a federally jurisdicted jurisdicted, is that a word? Program. However, Pathways is a wraparound program. And I know a lot about it because in my previous role as a public health planner, I was really inspired by Pathways, and I wanted to see if we could bring it to Thunder Bay. And what it does is it actually helps young people from incredibly disadvantaged situations see the potential of post-secondary education. One of the challenges of living in poverty is that you don't ever see anyone around you, oftentimes, that has made it out of poverty. And Pathways to Education, through a combination of tutoring and training and connections to post-secondary institutes and mentorship and financial support, creates an actual pathway to post-secondary education. And I think their graduation rate is somewhere in the range of 86%.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Mr. Picard.
I wish I had time with Mr. Sanga, if you don't mind. Madame la Ministre, bonjour.
Hello, Madam Minister. In the development of your approach, I understand that you drew upon some best practices abroad, including in Europe. What are some of the examples of programs that have inspired these changes and the model that you wish to implement in Canada?
Well, thank you very much. That's an excellent question. I think some things that we certainly could model. And you know, in Germany, when I had an opportunity to visit Germany, this is, I think, where I was the most inspired. And I saw that true relationship between government, between employers, and between academic institutions. starting as young as high school, as a matter of fact. And so the critical component was really the three parties working so closely together. So government was there to provide some support and to provide the legislative element and to provide some of the funding that allows this program to go on. The employers were there in terms of their commitment to having skilled, trained, experiential learning on site in their shops. I visited Tyson Krupp, for example. Some of you may be familiar with that. A large steel manufacturer. They have 25% apprenticeship rates in their employees. And so to be able to witness that partnership is something that I think we're very interested in. We have some challenges in that we have a different set of jurisdictional realities in Canada than perhaps they have in Germany. But we think that there's a very promising model in bringing together government, academic institutes, colleges, polytechniques, and the employers to create opportunities for experiential learning. And that's what's advised us in the student work placement program, is that opportunity to kind of create those relationships. And just as in Germany, what happens in Canada already is showing some promise in that employers are saying, I've invested this time in this young person, and it's been a worthwhile investment. They've invested half their salary in some cases and the time to train them to a very specific role in their company. And they get a chance to actually see that individual and how that individual will work out. And that investment actually propels them to make that permanent job offer. And that's exactly what we're hoping with an increase in student work placements.
I'll refer to Mr. Sanger for the rest of my time.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, in my riding of Brampton Centre and all over in riding, we feel that there is a shortage of manpower. Businesses are looking desperately for the manpower. And I feel that the student work placement program is the best program to put the students into the workforce. So my question to you is, what are you doing to involve businesses into the student work placement program? And what type of businesses are going to take part in this program?
Well, thank you very much. And that's an excellent question. And I think you're absolutely right. If we don't have the cooperation of employers, we really can't move forward. And that's why the student work placement program is so important, because it doesn't provide financial incentives to businesses in the form of subsidization of the rate of pay for the young person, but it also provides, as I was just talking about, the opportunity to play a bit of a matchmaker role, to take students from sectors which are often experiencing those great shortages and match them up with employers that are looking for those specific skills. So these are the STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and business sectors, to bring students from those sectors to employers who are saying, we have a shortage of labor in those areas. This is an opportunity for us. And we do this by incenting employers through the offering of incentives, financial incentives, but also by showing them the benefit of hiring young people in their organizations. And in fact, what employers are telling us time and time again is that they love this program because it really does give them an opportunity to take a young person, introduce them to their sector, see if they have that aptitude for their particular sector. And it's also an opportunity for students to see, is this really the sector that they want to work in? So it really is an opportunity for both the student and the employer to assess whether or not this is going to be a good match. And as their skills develop with that employer, they're able to, really utilize those skills in other work experiences.
Okay. There is an apprehension in the minds of the business people that when new students they come for the job, they don't give them total help, but rather they need more attention and they spoil the jobs. So for that, what your government is doing for that?
Well, I think there's always been stigma against youth, right? We've always heard those kinds of statements about young people, but what I can tell you is that employers that are being thoughtful about including young people in their workplaces are reaping the benefits. In fact, young people are bringing, that spirit of innovation and that new way of doing things. And I think that our challenge as older folks is to understand that things don't remain static, and that as the workplace evolves and as technology evolves, that we need to evolve with that. And that is about thinking how we meaningfully include the next generation of workers. Having said that, I think there is an opportunity when we work closely with post-secondary institutions, with employers, and with young people to really work on some of those soft skills, which are universal and ageless. And these are the skills about, basic human decency, how to treat each other kindly, what to do when you don't get along in the workplace, how do you answer a phone professionally, how, what is the importance of showing up on time. And those are some things that some people have, gained throughout their life experience, and others struggle with. And I would say that what employers are saying is that student work placement programs, experiential learning, gives them that opportunity to teach young people how to manage through some of those things. And as a parent of two young people myself, I can tell you that those are critical lessons. And when my older son comes home and talks about the struggle that he's having with his colleague, those are real struggles. And we all have those struggles as we especially are learning how to fit into a workplace. But what employers tell us is when they have an opportunity to work with a young person in the form of a student work placement, they can actually help that young person work through those challenges in a safe and supported way.
Thank you, Minister. And now MP Warwa, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Minister. I appreciate you for being here. The importance, and you've acknowledged that, the importance of us working together, all parties, pulling in the same direction, we're much more successful. The fact is that was part of your mandate letter, was to work in collaboration with your colleagues, meaningful engagement with opposition members of Parliament, and also the Parliamentary Committee. So thank you for being here. You were also encouraged to set the bar higher for openness and transparency. As a member of official opposition, we're to support the government on issues that we agree with, and hold the government to account on issues where we feel the government is not heading in the right direction. We do agree that it's important that we train our youth, the next generation of leaders, to help them prepare for moving from schooling into workforce. One thing I would disagree with you is that older workers, I think you define them as 28 years of age. Older workers are not 28, they're more like 50 and up, older workers like myself. And I'm 67 and still going strong. Minister, the previous government really put an importance of the trades in a growing country, and the trade apprenticeship program was expanded greatly and has been very good, and making sure our youth are trained in the red seals if they have interest in that, and it's opened up for opportunities for the different genders, and we're quite excited about that. Minister, you've said that when we invest in Canadians, it's good. Minister, I just pass on a side note here that the ice rink in front of the Prime Minister's office, the $5.6 million ice rink that will be open for a few weeks, that is not good use of taxpayers' money. Think of all the jobs and job opportunities for our youth if that $5.6 million was actually spent on helping youth. Minister, the other point is small business is the largest job creator in Canada. And the government, I think, is heading in the wrong direction is attacking our small business through increased taxation. A tax rate of 73% does not encourage growth in business, helping youth get jobs. It actually stifles that. And Minister, I also, in your mandate letter, noticed that you were to, in addition to working with committees and opposition parties and members, you're to work with the Minister of the President of the Treasury Board, the Minister of Immigration and Refugees and Citizenship, the Minister of Infrastructure, the Minister of Status of Women, and you've been promoted from that, the Minister of Families and Children, the Minister of Science, the Minister of Indigenous Northern Affairs, and I'm looking, the Minister of Treasury Board, but there's no Minister for Seniors. And I would suggest, I'll just stop my clock here.
Yeah. Relevance to, we have the Minister here to talk about the experiential learning, and I'm not clear as to why we're introducing all these other mandate letters. This relevance.
Thank you. I try to give as much latitude as possible with the questions, as you guys know. But I will ask Mr. Warwa. I've stopped his time, so he still has 2 minutes and 33 seconds. But if he could get to something that's topical for the discussion today, please.
Start the timer. Thank you. And I think this will all make sense in a moment. If we're all pulling in the same direction, Minister, we will be able to accomplish much more than if we're in a rowboat all rowing in different directions. And the encouragement in the mandate letter to work constructively. My passion and my responsibility is to represent Canadian seniors. And there is an incredible job opportunity, and you highlighted the changing workplace. Right now, there is a tremendous number of new job opportunities in geriatrics, palliative care, home care for our youth. And Minister, I've sensed in this committee to this point that there's not been an interest in seniors' issues. And so with you being here, Minister, I'm hoping that may change, because that's part of your mandate, is to make sure that we are working together constructively. We've heard from witnesses that there are job opportunities for youth taking care of our aging population. Tremendous job opportunities, also for small business. And so, Minister, I'm going to move a motion while you're here, and hopefully the committee will support this, that this study that we're doing regarding youth employment, that one additional meeting during this study will be for younger Canadians in job opportunities in home care, geriatrics, and palliative care. And I'm moving that in. And Minister, I hope the committee can deal with this quickly and openly within this meeting and not move into an in-camera meeting, because the minister's mandate is for openness and transparency, and if there's a motion to adjourn debate or move in camera, then that is not the open, transparent responsibility of the minister, and so moved. So,
Mr. Rumi?
I'd like to speak to it.
We have the minister here, so I move that we adjourn debate and focus on our minister.
Okay. All those.
I'd like a recorded vote, please.
All those in favor of adjourning the debate on this motion?
A recorded vote is individual.
Yep, I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, it was asked before, Mr. Speaker.
Yep. Yep.
Madame Fortier? Mr. Morrissey? Mr. Morrissey?
Mr. Morrissey?
Yeah. Mr. Picard? Mr. Rumi? Mr. Sangha? Monsieur Blaney?
No.
I vote no.
Mr. Warwa?
No.
Ms. Wong?
No.
Madame Sansusi?
Oui.
Thank you. And the motion has been adjourned. Thank you. And you do not have any time left, sir.
Actually, I do, sir. I had 20 seconds.
So I'm moving on.
It was a point of order, Mr. Speaker.
There was a point of order, Chair, and as soon as it was a point of order that was moved by Ms.
It's been adjourned. The motion's been adjourned.
The motion's been adjourned, but I still have
the debate. Sorry, the debate was adjourned on the motion.
So now
we're moving.
I'm back to my point of order.
Mr. Warwa.
Okay. The standing orders chair gives each of us in the first round 6 minutes.
And yes, sir.
And in the second round, it's 6 minutes for the first, second, and third questioner, and then it goes to 5 minutes. So the clocks that I use is a stopwatch here, and this is on an iPhone, and it's quite accurate, Chair. And so I had 6 minutes, and
fair enough. As per the clock that I use, which is right here, managed by the clerk, there was no time left. So I am moving on, and I am recognizing Mr. Morrissey for 6 minutes. We have a very limited time.
On to the question of the minister, the member, if that's possible.
If you wish,
I do.
Actually, sorry, I have ruled that the minister is out of time. If you wish to maybe answer it if Mr. Morrissey has some time, that would be the protocol. Mr. Morrissey.
Thank you, Chair. And it is regrettable. We have the minister here, and we want to speak about a very pressing issue in this country, which is youth unemployment and access to disadvantaged youth. And we spend this time on a debate. Minister, I want to go back to my earlier question on the disadvantaged youth, and you were alluding to it. Could you expand a bit more on, you referenced your 4 key areas that you're going to focus on going forward, which I agree with. Those must be focused on, especially capturing those youth that for lack of a better term, slip through the cracks, and how our government is going to focus on that.
Thank you very much. And I will respond to the former member's comments because, first of all, I understand you just concluded a senior study, so hopefully some of your answers to your questions are in the senior study. Secondly, I think that it was a little bit ironic to hear the member talk about the efforts that his previous Conservative government made to increase women in the trades, when he also concurrently talked about my role as Minister of Employment being a raise, essentially a promotion from status of Women Canada. In fact, it's incredibly sexist that the member would mention this as a promotion, because in fact, gender equality requires a full-time gaze. And if in fact you are going to make any efforts in terms of moving forward on gender equality, you have to understand that the Minister of Status of Women isn't a junior role. It isn't a role that you play to pretend that you're focused on gender equality, which is my suspicion what happened for the last 10 years, which is why we don't see women in skilled trades and we don't see women in non-traditional sectors, because we did not see a government that focused on the true equality of women. And I can tell you that for all of the members' comments about their efforts in the trades, we have 110,000 unfilled skilled trades positions in this country. It's a crying shame. We can't build the things we want to build, or fix the things that we want to fix, or build the new technology that we want to build with Canadian workers, because we can't find those people. So I'm sorry that I took up some time from your answer to respond to the previous member, but in fact I think it's very important that this is on the record, that our government is the first government truly focused to gender equality, and that the Minister of Status of Women, as a full minister, had an incredibly important role to ensure that women have their rightful place in Canadian society. Now, moving on to respond to the member, you're absolutely right.
Excuse me, sorry. Point of order, Mr. Blaney.
Monsieur le Président, alors nous avons...
Mr. Chair, this is a meeting on experiential learning for youth, so I would invite the minister to answer the questions that are being asked, respect the topic at hand, and I would also remind us that there has not been a debate. We could have settled this. We could have had a single further meeting to settle this, but if the members are truly here to help youth, we could have added another meeting to take care of that rapidly growing segment of the economy. So let's stay on the topic at hand.
So I will give it back
and I'm
to
happy to get back to the study at hand, which is experiential learning. And absolutely, you're right. We know that we, first of all, have to ensure that we help young people transition from school or training to work. And so apprenticeships is one of those ways. We know we have to make sure that young people are developing skills that are relevant to the workplaces of today, that we make sure that we, that employers have the talent that they need and that they can move forward in finding that talent. And of course, that we have a better participation of employers. I mean, part of the challenge is that government simply can't do everything. Employers have to invest in their own labor needs, and I've been speaking with sectors across the country, and largely I'm hearing agreements. I'm hearing that people understand that they need to develop the workforce of today and tomorrow with government, and we are more than happy to be a strong partner in that work, and we're looking forward to the creative ideas of the labor movement, of employers, to make sure that every young Canadian in this country has that fair shot at success.
Mr. Kuzner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And experiential learning, like the experience here today, I'm very much learning. If we could get something just straight, guys, let's not throw history out of this. To bring the questions about the rink, the real rink, to the minister today when she's here in front of us. Exactly. Well, the real rink was conceived under your current leader when he was Speaker of the House that wanted to bring the NHL game down and bring the rink to the... So we got to know that. The real rink wasn't a fake lake that was $2 million. That is probably... I don't know where the fake lake is now. So we're experiencing this. But you did make a good point.
I'm getting to. If we could bring it back to the
But you did make a good point. And that was about what you did under trades. You did a good job under trades.
Sorry, Mr. Kuzner. Yes, sir.
So, Chair, there has to be relevance and there has to be fairness. And if one call they're saying that we should be dealing with youth employment, which I tried to bring it all back to youth employment, and now we're talking
that's what I'm
about
doing
the
now.
rank and pointing figures of who. The government needs to take responsibility. It's been the government for over 2 years now, and it needs to take responsibility for the bad decisions and take credit for the good ones. Unfortunately, there's been more bad than good.
Fair enough. Now, I will point out that he was responding to a comment made by a member on your side, but I will give it back to Mr. Kuzner.
Thanks.
He has 1 minute and 20 seconds, and please
Thanks
get
very
back
much.
to the study. Please.
There was one good thing of all the many bad that was done under the last government. Jason Kenney did a good job with the job bank. It's not perfect, but there was some good stuff in it. And organized labor embraced that. The tradespeople embraced that. I'd like you to talk a little bit about your investment with trades and the commitment that you were made and the commitment that you followed through on to work with trades, at least to provide other opportunities for training in this country. It was one of the rare things that they got right, so let's give them some credit here today.
In about 45 seconds, please.
Right, and so I think this is an opportunity to talk about the union-based training program that we're just the call for proposals has just concluded, and we're very excited about this. And this is extending our partnership with the skilled trades, but also with the organized labor movement. Look, you know, the previous government made it an extraordinary effort to, I would say, decimate the organized labor movement. And we know that, in fact, organized labor and unions are a critical component to a strong and healthy middle class. And that's why we introduced Bill C-4 and we finally passed it. And I can tell you that unions are thrilled. And they are so happy to see a strong government, a liberal government, as a partner in ensuring a strong labor movement. And that's why we've moved forward with union-based training, because it's another way that we can demonstrate to unions that we believe that the work they do is critical to Canadians, not just in the things that they build and the work that they do on behalf of all Canadians, but on ensuring that next generation of talent. And so we'll look forward to making announcements in the months to come about how we'll be supporting unions with both the equipment and the recruitment to ensure that every Canadian, regardless of their gender, of their cultural background, of their physical ability, of their place of birth, will have an opportunity to participate in the skilled trades. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Seeing that we have actually surpassed the time that you've asked you've committed to being here today, I do apologize. That is going to be the end of questions. We have some committee business to do, which we will get to in just a moment. But I would just like to thank you, Minister, for appearing here today. Madam Sanssouci, you have a point of order?
No, it's
just that I wanted to know, Mr. Chair, I still had some questions, and I would have liked to get the answers from the Minister for the good of the study we're about to start. So I wondered if through the clerk we could send our questions to the Minister and get her answers in written form. I'd like to get some answers to the questions that I still have.
Yeah, okay. Let's do that through the clerk.
Just to clarify,
Mr. Rumi?
Sorry, just to clarify. So I know we ran out of time for our NDP colleague, but that's only for her to be able to submit that. We're not opening it up to a whole bunch of folks.
I think we can open it up. I think that we have, I'm sure, a number of questions on our side as well that we'd like to get responses to. No? Patty?
Mr. Chair, my officials will also be here in the next couple of days as well, so you can ask any questions to the officials. So there are multiple opportunities.
That's a good point. Okay. Thank you very much, Minister. I do have one piece of business that I do want to get to before we wrap up. On Thursday, I'll be presenting the travel budget to SPLE. As you know, I have always wanted to be efficient with our time and with the energy of not just the people around this table, the members around this table, but also the staff teams that do a lot of the work. I don't want to move forward if we do not have unanimous support for the travel, and I'd like to put that question today to this group if we have unanimous support for me to go to SPLE to report to advocate for this travel budget. Mr. Warawa.
So, Chair, which travel are you referring to?
The only travel that we have we've been awarded. Let me see here. Yes. So the under committee business, it was agreed that in relation to a study on accessibility and disabled Canadians, the proposed budget in the amount of $117,947 for the committee's travel, and then a number of different cities that we
on which
discussed.
topic?
You, I'm certain, are aware of this, but I will repeat it again. Study on accessibility and disabled Canadians.
So, Chair, to speak to that, we have to be very careful with how we spend taxpayers' dollars. And as what was referenced as a bit of a boondoggle in front of the Prime Minister's office, a skating rink, not good use of dollars, and traveling is not necessary, so you will not have unanimous consent.
Okay. Mr. Rumi?
I just feel compelled to say this. If the opposition want to hold our disabled and our vulnerable hostage, I would find that to be a shame before we go to a vote. Because, pardon?
Please direct this way, folks.
Oh, sorry, the official opposition. You're right.
Thank you.
Before we go to the vote, why I don't understand why we would hold our vulnerable hostage when we have good work that we could be doing. And this is something that we did agree in the beginning to do.
Just for the record, I'm not asking for there to be a vote on this. I'm asking if there is unanimous consent. I've already been told that's not the case. So that's it moving forward. Mr. Warawa.
Just to respond to Mr. Rumi, I think everybody, I would trust that everybody supports looking at ways to help people that have a disability, and that creates accessibility problems with their disability. And I think that's good that we look at that. Actually, having to travel and spend taxpayers' dollars over $100,000 is not good use of those tax dollars. We can do the study from this by seeing pictures and having expert witnesses come in, video conference testimony, and we save taxpayers dollars. The goal of the official opposition is to make sure the government is spending their tax dollars, not their tax dollars, Canadian, hardworking Canadian tax dollars, spending them wisely. And we don't believe the government is spending the dollars wisely. We can do the job without spending money foolishly.
Mr. Blaney, and then...
Oui, Monsieur le Président, je veux simplement rappeler qu'on a...
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to remind us that we discussed this. We had the opportunity to discuss this, and the reason that we have reservations about this trip is that, firstly, as you indicated, it's ultimately been requested by the government side. Secondly, the relevance of this travel doesn't seem clear to us. And that's why I would tell you that you do not have the support of the Conservative Party or in the House either.
On this same point of order, I think it might be worthwhile if the clerk, obviously, as a government, we are committed to not wasting taxpayers' dollars as well. A similar study was undertaken in the last Parliament. It would be interesting to go back and see what the travel budget was under the Conservatives, as to where they travel. I don't think you have to travel with the entire committee. I think you can keep costs down, but I think it's an absolute insult and a disrespect for the people that are out there trying, right across this country, trying to provide services for persons with disabilities. as new members of Parliament, it's imperative that you get out and see this country and understand what's going on in the different regions of this world. There is no cookie-cutter approach to any kind of program in this country, and it's imperative that you get out and see the reality on the ground. Our party certainly committed to it. We believe that you can keep the costs down, but I think it would be worthwhile for the committee if you sort of scratched out to see what the travel budget was and where they went last
Adam, just a moment, please. I have Adam, Ramesh, Mark, and Alice. Go.
Accessibility to the parliamentary process is one of the most fundamental rights of a citizen of this country, and there is no group that is more disadvantaged, faces more barriers, and faces more obstruction than people with disabilities and the advocates that they themselves often are. People with lived experience are a critical part of the way in which evidence is produced, experience is understood, and policy needs to be developed, and it needs to change. And a parliamentary committee that is studying the issue of disability, that makes the barriers and the obstructions so much more of a challenge to allow those voices to be present around the table and be present to provide evidence and experience, I think is creating quite literally a barrier to democracy, a barrier to people's civil rights and liberties being pursued. And I would strongly and hopefully urge, in particular because one of the people that has spoken about this is a strong advocate for seniors who often face even more challenges with disabilities because of age and because of barriers, I would strongly ask and urge the opposition, in this case the Conservative members, to reconsider the advantages that would be gained, the experiences that would be seen, and the voices that would be heard by us reaching out and moving towards people with disabilities as opposed to making them march to Ottawa. And I will be very, very frank with you. The disability community is watching this very closely and understand exactly who put the barriers in their way to participate.
Ramesh, and then Mark.
I'm with Adam because it's our duty, rather. We have to see that we are looking after the other people's interest also. Not only that we are not going to the other places, we should go. And if you want to save the money, just go down on this Rideau Road, go down past the Sussex Road, and you will find the accessible people there. And you go and do the study only one place. That's not enough. We need to go to whole Canada. We have to watch everyone. Those who want, those who are accessible people, those who are interested to know it.
Excellent. Thank you. And Mark?
Chair, if there was a study on seniors and all the issues related to seniors, including accessibility, then I think this would be a very worthwhile travel. But what we've heard from Mr. Kuzner is that in the last Parliament, this has already been done. And that's what Canadians object to, is they go out and it appears like there's junkets. Well, we already spent money on travel in the last Parliament. Then what information was gleaned in that last Parliament? And instead of keep on studying and studying and studying, do something. And that's what Canadians expect. I reflect on the report from the Commissioner from the Environment. The Commissioner said bold announcements, and this is referring to the Liberal government at the time, bold announcements are made and then often forgotten as soon as the confetti hits the ground. The federal government seems to have trouble crossing the finish line. It's time to do something, not to make more bold announcements, more confetti in the air. If we already have this information, if we've already traveled, then let's do something. If there's going to be a study on seniors and dealing with home care, and along with that, how we can get our youth jobs in that field, then I think I would support it. But just a very narrow focus. The government has this, I believe, an announcement they want to make, and so they want us to travel, and then there's going to be an announcement. Oh, we listened, and here's some funds that we're going to give. Everybody's going to get. We're going to make this announcement that in 2021 to 2050, we're going to provide billions of dollars. Let's be real. Let's do it now. Let's do it in this Parliament, and let's not keep moving the goalposts. If we've already done the travel, let's find out what we learned at that travel instead of wasting more money on travel.
Before we continue, I've got three more on the list. I got Alice, Dan, and Roger. It is 5:30. I do need to ask for consent to continue.
No.
Okay. And that's that. Thank you very much, everybody. As always, thank you to everybody
do something,
up
right?
here
Let's just get her done, right? Let's just stop everything.
What on seniors in the last Parliament
thank
too?
you guys. And
You didn't have a
Are we-
problem
are
when
we
we
over?
went to
We're
your
over.
riding
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
to visit your seniors' home.